So now we have the first face and the second face down on the board. You would think that you could probably do the third face on the jointer planer that we just used, but the problem is it's a little narrow on this side and thicker on this side, so it is going to follow that face wherever it may be. So even though you will get this face flat and smooth, it's not necessarily going to be parallel. So then we move over to this machine. It's called a thickness planer. The difference between this and a jointer is this table locates on this face. A jointer has the cutter head right in this table here, but on a thickness planer it's mounted above and is parallel with this table. So when I put this board in like this, there's rollers inside the machine that are actually going to grab the board and feed it through. It's going to hold it down against this face, and it is going to plane this face flat and parallel with the first face. To do that, first of all, I need to do a couple things. First, I want to check the board to see how thick it is. So I check this, and it's 1 5/16 of an inch thick there, but it's only 1 1/8 over here. Well, I'm going to check it a couple different places. Here, it's 1 5/16, and down on this end, it's 1 1/8. So this corner is thicker. That's the board or the face that I want to run in first because it's thicker. So it's going to take some wood off, but not necessarily all the wood that I need to take off. It's going to make it parallel, so it might not clean up that face on one cut. So I want to adjust the machine so it's taking no more than 1/8 of an inch thickness of a cut. So since I'm at 1 5/16, I'm going to play it safe and set the cutter height at 1 1/4 inches. To do that, I turn the machine on. First, I check the emergency stop. So keep this in mind. To turn this machine on, if it's pushed in, you have to twist the knob and then it pops out. Don't just try to pull the knob out. You're going to break it. If you just twist it, it pops out on its own. Now it's ready to go. I can turn the machine on here. I turn the feed or the cutter head on with this, and the feed rollers with this. To make the bed go up and down, I use either one of these push buttons to move the cutter head or the table up or down in relationship to what I want. We have a ruler on here. The digital readout in this machine is broken, and since it went out of production several years ago, we can't get parts for it anymore, but it still works fine. We just have to use this scale here. This digital readout down here will work, and if I look at this, it says that it's 1.56 or 1 9/16 of an inch thick. That's a lot thicker than I want the board. I want to cut it at about 1 1/4. So I'm going to move the table up to 1 1/4 here, and it'll read 1.25 down there. And then I'm going to take a cut. So I'll turn it on. And I adjust it up. And right there is about where I want it. Never put my fingers underneath the board. Put it in and let the machine pull itself through. Now I check it, and it is right at 1 1/4 inches. except for this low spot over here. And if I check it all the way across the length, it's going to be exactly the same. But this isn't cleaned up and this isn't cleaned up. So I am going to run it through the machine again. I'm going to take this down to 1 inch thick. So I'm going to adjust it up so it takes another 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to take about 3 or 4 cuts to get this to the thickness that I want. So I'm going to take one more cut on this to clean it up all the way across the board. And once I do that, and I have it nice and flat and cleaned up, for each successive cut, I'm going to turn it over and take a cut off the opposite side. So each time I take a successive cut, I turn it. So I've got about 3 cuts to take. So let's get started. So with that board is right at 1 inch thick. Went through quickly, easily. It's flat, smooth. First and third face is parallel with each other. And this remains perpendicular to the first face. To do the fourth face, you might think that you want to put the board on edge and run it through the thickness plane. The problem with that is it might twist as it goes through. So the only way to do the fourth face is to go over to the table saw and rip it on the table saw. And when you do that, with the fence being perpendicular or parallel to the blade, now you're going to have that board parallel all the way down, perpendicular, so you have 4 faces, flat, parallel, and square. If you want this to be a little bit smoother, then the table saw will leave it. You just leave the board a little bit wide. You go back over to the jointer and you take a cut on the jointer. But you don't want to just go right over to the jointer right away, because if this board is wider at this end than that end, when you get done, it is still going to be wider at one end than the other end. So you have to run it through the table saw to get it parallel. Then you can take the jointer and just do a cleanup to get it nice and smooth, and you have 4 faces done. So the last machine would be to go over to the miter saw and you cut the boards to length. I like to do one end. I can get rid of this knot here, but by doing that, now I can get that end square and parallel with everything down here. And then I cut the board to length. But you always want to make sure that it's cutting square and parallel. Never go back to the jointer and try to joint the end grain. The board's too short, too unstable. You can't effectively cut end grain on a jointer. Don't even try it. It doesn't work. And I won't yell at you if you don't then.